لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. Bismillah. Okay. Bismillah. There we go. There. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. رب اشرح لي صدري يا رب العالمين يا أرحم الراحمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافي مزيدا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا أرحم الراحمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. Inshallah ta'ala, we're about a couple hours away, inshallah ta'ala. We're a couple hours away from embarking upon the last 10 nights of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala. We're at the precipice of the last 10 nights, these last 10 nights in which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes in a hadith, in which the last 10 nights of Ramadan are the nights of emancipation, or are the days of emancipation. The days of being free from the fire of hell, from being free from the anger and displeasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from being free from a sense of disconnection from Allah azza wa jal, a sense of disconnection from God jalla jalaluhu wa ta'ala fil ula. And that's what these last 10 nights are for. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala used to describe him in these last 10 nights, to get ready for this emancipation, to get ready for the vigor and the rigor of these last 10 nights, to get ready for just after 10 days, the devils that are locked, that are chained away, and they will be released. Those devils that have been chained away for the past 20 days, and they'll be released after another 10 days. And all of the spiritual comfort and ease in worship and ease in following within the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and following in the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the increased ease that many of us have felt, not maybe everybody, but many of us have felt, that will all of a sudden become more difficult and will be faced back to, let's not say reality in terms of reality of reality, our spiritual reality right now being how we can be, because Ramadan is all about the potential of how we can be, and this is our true reality. And when we're falling short of our spiritual potential, this potential that we're able to display during Ramadan, really we're just falling short of our reality. We're not really truly living in reality. And so we go back to a life of illusion after Ramadan. We go back to a life of illusion, illusion of being distracted by the devils, the illusion of succumbing to the lower parts of our nafs, the lower parts of ourselves. And it's all just an illusion. The realness is this real taste of Iman, inshallah ta'ala, that we're all able to taste throughout the entire Ramadan, inshallah azza wa jal. But in any regard, that's the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he used to prepare himself in these last 10 days for the vigor and rigor of them by sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by increasing in his acts of worship. As Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu ta'ala used to describe, that he used to, quote unquote, tighten his waist belt sallallahu alaihi wasallam in these last 10 nights. And she used to describe in a hadith in Bukhari. And by tightening his waist belt, it means that he used to really become extremely more concerned with his worship, and to even reduce the amount of other pursuits during the course of his day, and especially in the evening times, that he would stay awake all night, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and engage in much more ibadah, engage in much more prayer, engage in much more remembrance, and obviously engage in the practice of i'tikaf, which is a commonplace practice in the month of Ramadan in these last 10 nights, which individuals would seclude themselves for the worship of their Lord Jalla Jalaluhu. However, in these times right now, it's really actually kind of difficult for us, right? Difficult for us in the sense for the men, right, of being able to go to the masajid, for those of us that were able to go in previous years and make the i'tikaf, right? And then even more so with, increase in responsibilities in the home, increase in difficulties in obtaining necessities and essentials and whatnot, it could be even difficult for both men and women to make i'tikaf within the home, or at least within a secluded room within the home. So, but in any regard, inshallah azza wa jal, the niyyah and intentions are there, inshallah ta'ala. And just because that there are certain restrictions placed upon us in this Ramadan, it doesn't mean that the blessings are any less. Rather, it could be that they are more, because it gives us an opportunity for us to even strive and to struggle even more. And that kind of leads us into the idea of luxuries, right? What's a luxury, what's necessity, what's a luxury and what's necessity? And that really leads us into our discussion today on abstinence. This lesson number 19, this lesson on abstinence. Abstinence meaning what? Being able, we don't mean in terms of, when we speak about abstinence, we mean in a more holistic sense, the holistic sense of being able to refrain from something, not having to engage in something or in anything, or restraining oneself from the material possession of somebody else. The material possession of somebody else. And it's something that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to make frequent dua for. One of the du'as that Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be, Allahumma inni as'aluka al-huda wa tuqa wa afa wa ghina. Right? That, oh Allah, I beseech you for guidance, for piety, or spiritual awareness, consciousness, and chastity, hafaf, which comes from ifa, which is abstinence, wal ghina, and from and self-sufficiency, or I ask you for self-sufficiency. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to ask for this sense of abstinence, this sense of being able to do without, this sense of being able to restrain oneself from indulging. Really, the essence of abstinence is restraining oneself from engaging in or indulging in any desires that they don't really need, that doesn't come directly from Allah Azza wa Jal, restraining oneself from asking from others or from obtaining things from others out of necessity or without any kind of necessity. And when we look at the society around us, so let's apply that to the society around us. In this age of consumerism that we all live in, this information age of consumerism, when we have billboards and advertisements and ads that pop up on YouTube and Facebook when we're scrolling, and they're catered to exactly what we have been searching for on the internet, or exactly what we've been looking up on our phones or what have you, that it's specifically catered to us, and it's getting more and more advanced as time goes on, as technology gets more advanced. And so everything is really being catered to the nafs. Everything is really being catered to, driving this insatiable desire within us that we just have to keep having. I just have to have this, I just have to have that. I need this, I need that. And it's always in the internet, the television, the billboards, everything in life is telling us you constantly, you need this, you need this. The iPhone 10 came out, you need the iPhone 10 XR. The iPhone 10 XR came out, you need the iPhone 10 Jumbo. The iPhone 10 Jumbo came out, now you need the iPhone 11 now. You need 2 cameras. Now, 1 camera's not enough, no, you need 2 cameras on the back. Right? Or whatever it may be, you constantly need, you need this, you need that. And it just fosters the sense of deprivation within us. It fosters a sense that we always are in a constant state of need. We need the latest model of things. We need the latest We need the most up-to-date fashion because this is not in season anymore. Now this is in season. This is how you're gonna look good or what have you like that. And we're just living in a society that's constantly telling us that we need things that we don't really need, that we want things that we were never even thinking about. We don't even really even want. Subhanallah. And so this energy just keeps constantly getting fed. This energy that we're in a constant state of deprivation, and that we just want more, and we need more, and we want more, and we need more, and we want more. And it's something that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned 3 matters connected to the character of a Muslim and swore an oath concerning them. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and now this comes from the text, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, there are 3 things about which I swear an oath, that the more forgiving a person becomes, the more he increases in nobility, that charity does not decrease a person's wealth, and that whenever someone opens up upon himself the door of asking from others, Allah opens for him the door of poverty. Right? And so in this discussion, when it comes to advertisements, right? And advertisements and paid for ads, catered to ads, things like this, right? That when we have these doors opened up for us, where we're put in a position where we're just constantly asking what else we need, what else do we want, and we're just constantly in that state, that's really what opens up the doors to poverty. And maybe not in a physical monetary sense, right? But a sense of deprivation, that we're always in a state of poverty. This feeling that we have, this void that we have in our hearts. That's what the Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is indicating in the hadith. And it speaks to another hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which he says, al-ghina ghina nafs, that self-sufficiency is really the self-sufficiency of the soul, right? Or that the richness is really the richness of the soul, meaning that a person doesn't have that sense of deprivation and a void within them. They're not always constantly asking others for something. They're not always succumbing to information that tells you you need more. They don't have that sense of poverty, even if they have the entire world in their bank account balance. They're not in that constant state of need, but rather they're sufficient. They feel rich. And because why? Because they have a richness of the soul. Because there's no void inside, that they feel whole inside, that they don't feel like they need something from others in order to satisfy some deficiency in the ego, or some piece of low self-esteem within the self. Nasallallahu salam wa afiyah. Nasallallahu salam wa afiyah. And so the author states that the believers only seek wealth through ways which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has subscribed through, as trade, manufacturing, agriculture, and other means which are in accordance with the sacred law. They do not hanker after the wealth of others, and they never ask from people when they are capable of working and earning their own living. And so the believer is somebody in which takes it upon themselves to be self-sufficient. A lot of this discussion is going to be dominated by self-sufficiency, by a sense of ghina, being independent, or being rich, richness in the soul, as the Prophet Muhammad said, as we mentioned just in the hadith. Al-ghina ghina nafs, that true richness is the richness of the soul. Right? We don't have that sense of that void within us. We don't need to feel dependent upon others. We're not in a position where maybe we lost our job as a result of the coronavirus, and instead of just waiting for unemployment, perhaps we're just looking for new employment ourselves, so we don't have to depend upon a system, we don't have to depend on the government. If we're in a position in which we could work, maybe it might be a little bit difficult in our situation, or we could hustle or earn our own money somehow, or something such as that, that we're not just going to automatically file for Social Security services, and we leave those for people who really need it, and leave that for people who really need it if we're not in actual need at that point. And so it's this lack of dependence upon others. That a true quality of a Muslim isn't one that always has their hand out. They don't always have their hand out asking from others like this. But rather, a quality of a Muslim is one who always has his hand out and flat like this to give. That even if they're in the state in which they actually are in a state of poverty, they still have their hand out like that. Because the poverty that exists around them only exists in their outside circumstances. But they have the richness of the soul. They don't have a void within their soul that they just have to try to keep filling. It's not a bottomless pit that they're just trying to fill constantly over and over and over again. Through this vain pursuit of consumerism, through this vain pursuit of needing the next thing, through this vain pursuit of asking other people of their wealth, so they don't actually have to try to go out and actually be sufficient on their own. And that's this quality of irfa, this quality of abstinence that is mentioned from Sayyidina Habib Umar Hafidullah Ta'ala. And so he continues to state that if people beg, claiming poverty, while possessing provision for a day and night, then what they receive from people is unlawful. And so if an individual is begging, but they already have their provision, like the money that they need, the clothes that they need, the food that they need for that day. This might be a little bit extreme maybe in our times, but in regard, if they have it for that day, then what they receive from people is unlawful. Because really our only concern really should be for this day. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ advised us to be in this world as if we were a traveler. That we don't become attached. We don't become attached to this world. We don't become attached to materialism. That we don't become attached to the idea of hoarding. And really it's something that is really un-Islamic behavior. And it's not proper human behavior where people have engaged in a lot of hoarding of toilet paper and food and canned food and I just need a stash, I just need to. That doesn't come from our tradition. Our tradition doesn't come from, well, let me tie my camel. That's not the application of tie my camel. It doesn't come, let me tie my camel and just hoard all of this food, all of this toilet paper, all of this, etc. There was a video that came out on Facebook or something, in which an individual described that, when they were in Syria, before they became a refugee and ended up in Canada, that they were in a situation where in Syria that even the poorest of individuals, maybe perhaps they received some kind of candy that has like multiple like little pieces of candy in it, and they were sitting and they saw this individual, this poor young girl, and she had this candy and she offered it to the other person, even though the other person wasn't in need of any candy. Yet when they came to Canada, they would be engaging in conversations with friends, and the friends would just be eating their own food and never offer it to the other. Right? It doesn't come from the quality of believer that we don't offer to others. Right? It's not from the quality of believer that we just hoard for ourselves at the expense of thinking about the other. Right? That's not true wealth. That's not true sufficiency. True sufficiency is when one feels sufficient within their own selves, even if in their hands they don't have a lot. La ilaha illallah. It is only lawful for people to beg, claiming poverty, if they do not possess provision for a day and a night. And even that comes within when we give zakat al-fitr. When it comes to the Yawm al-Eid, those individuals that qualify for zakat al-fitr are only those who don't have their provision for that day. It doesn't mean for after Eid. It doesn't mean for the day after it, or 2 days after it, or for the month after it. But we give zakat al-fitr to those that don't have. It's not incumbent upon those who don't have. It's not incumbent upon those who don't have their provision for that day. If you have your provision for the day, then it's incumbent upon you to pay zakat al-fitr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay. So if they are given what they need for that day, they must refrain from begging until the following day, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will once again provide for them with what they need. If Muslims show abstinence concerning the property of others, Allah will give them the means to achieve contentment. As the Prophet ﷺ says, real wealth is not the amount of good one possesses. Real wealth is inner wealth. Yani, al-ghina nafs. That true richness is the richness of the soul. We have a saying in our society, right? That money can't buy happiness. That money can't buy happiness. And even by psychological research standards, when a person reaches at about, I believe the number is about anywhere between 60 and 70,000 per year, or somewhere around there in the United States, that if an individual makes even more than that, that there's no trade-off, there's no adjustment in terms of their levels of content and levels of happiness. That really kind of just flattens out. Yani, i.e. that when an individual reaches a certain state of they have enough to take care of their needs, their family's needs, or whatever else it is, their basic provisions within their life, and anything above that really doesn't lead to any extra happiness. If anything, according to a poet from the American tradition, right, that's more money, more problems, right? The poet Notorious B.I.G., more money, more problems. The more money that individual has, the more wealth that individual has, really it only brings more problems. It only brings more issues. It doesn't lead to a greater state of happiness. Nasallallahu salam wa afiyah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought refuge with Allah from poverty, and the scholars say that what he meant was not a lack of material possessions, right? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in another hadith that poverty is almost akin to kufr, but it's not poverty in the sense that an individual that doesn't have much. No, it doesn't mean that. No, but rather, as the scholars mentioned, but rather an inner sense of poverty, which keeps the one who is afflicted by it hankering after others' wealth. Right? And so when one feels this void or this emptiness inside, I think we all maybe have had colleagues or friends or people that are searching, that are always trying to fill that void. Maybe it's through alcohol, maybe it's through drugs, maybe it's through a clothing buying binge, or maybe it's through, we've all known people that have struggled with addiction, right? Or have struggled with just vain attachment to other things. They're constantly moving around from one haram relationship to the next, or they're moving from one girlfriend or one boyfriend to the next, just kind of just cycling on through, or whatever it is like that. And they're never satisfied, they're never content. That's poverty. When you don't feel whole inside, right? When you don't feel whole inside, people say that they're looking for their better half. But you don't find, it's not that you find a better half that can complete you. That's only a Hollywood rendition of love, of contentment, of wholeness. Rather, wholeness comes from the self. True relationship exists when two whole individuals come with one another, or they try to become whole in of themselves and then give what they are to the other. Right? In a relationship example, but the sense of being whole within oneself. And that's true richness. We don't try to look for outside of ourselves to fill that void, to fill that emptiness. Rather, we look for it from within. God doesn't give us Jalal Jalaluhu from outside of us, and then it brings us content and iman and happiness and faith. Rather, God facilitates that from within. Allahumma inna nas'aluka al-huda wa tuqa al-afafa wal-ghina. Oh Allah, I ask you for guidance, comes from within. From tuqa, the tuqa for piety and taqwa, which comes from within. Which then, what else does come from within? Afaf, a sense of chastity, or abstinence, it comes from within. And ghina, a sense of self-sufficiency, what doesn't come from the amount of your bank balance, but it comes from within. All of those things that the Prophet Muhammad asked for, comes from within. And so this kind of poverty causes a great deal of damage. Muslims must take the path of abstinence, spending their surplus wealth and guarding their tongues against excessive speech. When someone asked one of the great men of the past, one of Salaf Saleh, when he asked one of the great men of the past for advice, he said, keep your palm open, like this, not like this, like this, palm open, and keep your jaw shut. In other words, spend freely from what you possess. Spend freely from what you possess. And guard your tongue against excessive speech, for the one who sticks to this advice will be considered by Allah as someone who remembers Him much and is grateful to Him. And this is how the Muslims should be, right? As we've kind of already mentioned, right? As we've already mentioned, that an individual who is truly self-sufficient, even if they only have a little bit, a person who truly has content with Allah Azza wa Jal in the provision which He gets from Him, is an individual who is always in this position of giving, not in this position constantly asking from others and not constantly asking from others. And if they do reach that point where they have to ask from others, they only get specifically what they need to fulfill whatever obligation or whatever necessity that they need at that moment, and then they move on. And then they move on. La ilaha illallah. And to return to the hadith mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, right? The believer must look at the results of those actions about which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam swore an oath. The first being that the more forgiving a person becomes, the more he or she increases in their nobility. And so that whoever forgives the one who has harmed them or forgoes a right which is due to them will be ennobled. And it's something that was mentioned by one of our teachers in the context of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and His judgment over us on Yawm al-Qiyamah, that it doesn't diminish from, obviously, it doesn't diminish from the nobility and the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal, that He forgives a sin, right? Or that He breaks a warning, that he breaks a warning, right? If he warns us that if we commit such and such sin, that will be deserving of hell, that's a warning that Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving to us. But it doesn't diminish from his nobility that he forgives us that sin and forgives us of that warning and pardons us. But rather it would be, and it doesn't befit Allah Azza wa Jalla, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't break his promises, right? It doesn't break his promises. And so if Allah Azza wa Jalla, and we see this is obviously not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does, but if, I can't even bring myself to say the words, but yani, when we receive a promise from somebody and they don't fulfill that promise, say they're going to give us, $10 to help us out or something like that. If they don't fulfill that promise, then that diminishes from nobility. But if somebody prevents us from some kind of harm and doesn't allow us and says that and mentions that is warning us that if you don't give me my $10 back, then I'm not going to be your friend anymore or something like that. But they forgive us and pardon us. That's actually a sign of nobility. But when somebody doesn't fulfill a promise that they promised us that they were going to give us, then that would decrease from a person's nobility and their status and their honor. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And so when a person forgives, it increases them in nobility. Even when they say they're going to do something that could bring harm to us, if they forgive us for that, it actually increases them in their nobility. Right? And because they will not be harmed or abased by forgiving others. Many people say that if you forgive someone and forgo your right over them, you encourage them to take advantage of you. That people will scorn you and look down upon you. Mention to them what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned in this hadith that we mentioned about, the more forgiving someone is, that the more they increase in nobility. And even in our times now, a lot of people get very hypersensitive about taking their rights from others. I have a right to this, I have a right to that. You owe me this, you owe me that. A sense of entitlement is really something that is increasingly more pervasive in our society. On a social level, when it comes to social rights, on a familial level, when it comes to, say, marriage rights, spousal rights, or what have you like that, or even monetarily between businesses, what have you. Everybody's just concerned about what they can get. And if you forgive somebody, if you just kind of let something go, you're seen as passive, you're seen as weak, you're seen as soft, right? We've all heard those words before. And if we hear those words, it's not something that's we should hang our heads over too much. And because of these statements of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that even if we're seen as being soft or as being weak, if we're just kind of overlooking the faults of others or what have you, or we're just kind of constantly in a state of being forgiving, then do we not want the same from Allah Azza wa Jalla on Yawm al-Qiyamah? Do we not want that same kind of constant being overlooked, that constant state of forgiveness, that constant state of, don't we want that constantly from Allah Azza wa Jalla? For him to overlook us, for him to forgive us repeatedly for all of our little mistakes and all of our big mistakes and all of our little faults and all of our big faults, our little and small sins, everything. So how should we not be that way towards others? Really, it's a praiseworthy quality, as the Prophet Muhammad confirmed, and it's exactly what we want from Allah Azza wa Jalla on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So how could we not provide that for others? How could we not be constantly forgiving to others? Obviously within limits and within certain rights that shouldn't be transgressed upon, such as when it's actually starting to become harmful to your faith or harmful to your physical body or your emotions. Secondly, people say that if you spend your wealth in various charitable causes, your wealth will be reduced and your financial state weakened. Say to them, charity does not decrease a person's wealth. And this is something that's been repeated from the Prophet Muhammad over and over again, and it was within that previous hadith that we mentioned, that he swore by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that spending in charity never decreases a person's wealth. And really, many of us who have given, whatever in charity before, we all have experienced wealth that has come from seemingly nowhere. I remember when I was in Egypt, I was going to teach some children English. This was how I kind of survived in Egypt. I just kind of taught English to various different families around in the area. And so I was on my way to teach. I wasn't dressed in a thobe or anything. I had on a shirt and pants, etc. And then there was a random individual as I was walking towards the bus. A random individual came and he just said, "Assalamu alaikum," and then he went to shake my hand, and then he left me close to like 200 jineh in my hand, which is like, I don't know, $40 or something like that. Maybe at the time it was like $40. Which for me at that time, that's a good amount that I needed at that time. And I asked him, "What are you doing? Why are you giving me this money?" And he said, "Wallah, I just thought that you were one of the students of Azhar, and so I just wanted to give you this money." Yeah, and I'm dressed in like a khaki pants and a shirt and a button-down shirt. I did not look like a student from Azhar. I don't even know if I was wearing a kufi at the time. But it's just wealth that came from. SubhanAllah, it was just wealth that came. And then he took me by the hand and led me to a bookshop and then just gave me books for free, Bismillah. And then I never saw that man again, but SubhanAllah. Wealth can just come. You at least expect it. And we've all had the experience. Maybe a business deal strikes itself when we weren't really expecting it to hit. Or perhaps, we have a friend who just kind of just wants to, help us out, or they just pay, for something like that. Or a family member just sends us something in the mail and we don't expect it. It comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. We've all had these experiences, SubhanAllah. We've all had these experiences, SubhanAllah. Or we get a little bit more in our tax returns than we were originally expecting, or were really procrastinated from the accountant or what have you, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who gives. With him is a provision. And it's said by some of the righteous that they're more trusting of the provision that has been written with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more so than the provision and the money that exists right in their hand, right in front of them. Right? And so having this lack of need to depend on others, rather we depend on Allah Azza wa Jal. That we don't have to seek from others. We don't have to ask from others. We don't have to indulge in others. We remain abstinent from that. And we trust with the treasures of Allah. We trust with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thirdly, whenever someone opens upon himself the door of asking from others, Allah opens for him the door of poverty. The more people ask, the more they increase in poverty. The hadith refers to those who ask for themselves, greedily coveting the wealth of others. They are the ones for whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the door of poverty. Those who ask on behalf of the needy, encouraging the wealthy to spend for the common good to gain Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's reward, are not those intended by this hadith. So, fundraisers, things like that doesn't enter into this hadith. It's really when people are just looking for it for their own selves. When they're looking for it for their own selves, and to enrich and kind of whatever, to get something in their hand, that which they don't really need, that which they're just coveting, they're just jealous of others, so they're asking for others so that way they can just receive. Right? And so those are the individuals that the hadith is talking about. Muslims who are truthful in their Islam live their lives in a state of contentment with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for them, seeking their sustenance in that which Allah prescribed and putting their trust in Him. They abstain from others' possessions, pay no heed to them, and do not covet them. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Whatever wealth comes to you without you seeking it, take it, and use it if you are in need of it. Otherwise, give it away in charity. As for the wealth which comes to you as a result of your own effort, do not allow your heart to be attached to it." Right? And a common dua that a lot of righteous mention is that they don't make the material, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't make the material world a concern for them in their hand, or that they makes it something only existing in their hand, but doesn't make the material world something that takes a hold of the heart. And so it comes from a sense of noble character and character refinement, that we examine truly it is what we need and what we really don't need, what we have to do with and what we can do without. And this Ramadan is a very good barometer to really find out what it is that we need, what we don't need, how much social media we really need to engage in, and what we really don't. Can we do without it? How much TV we actually really need to watch a day, or what we can do without. How much we really need to spend on groceries, or what we can really do without. How much we actually really have the ability to spend in charity for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, versus how much we spend throughout the rest of the year fearing, well, wait, I gotta pay this bill, oh wait, I gotta, and let me just keep this because I'm gonna need my morning coffee before going to work. Right? We don't become attached to either the wealth that we earn ourselves, or we don't become attached to if wealth just comes our way randomly, that we examine it with what we need and what we don't need. And if we don't need, well, then we give it to somebody else who does need. That's the society that a Muslim creates for his or herself. That's the environment that we foster in our communities. Mutual giving, assessing the needs of other people, And if we have, Bismillah. It goes to the story of Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Umar. One time the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and there were an expedition that was coming into Medina that were in a needy state at the time. And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he enlisted the companions, asking them to give for their sake. So he was assessing for the individuals who has whatever. And so Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, he came out and he took everything in his home and he split it in half. Right? He split it in half, even the jewelry in the house. He split it in half and he gave that fi sabilillah, subhanallah. Everything literally in half. Imagine everything in this room that you're sitting in, that you take half of what is in your room and you just give it for the sake of Allah. You sell it to a pawn shop, you give it to the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he came and he donated everything he had in his home. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh just looked at him like, subhanallah. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, what have you left for your family? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh said, I left them Allah and His Messenger. And this was the sadness of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. This was the status of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And he assessed for himself that he wasn't in need of anything. The only thing he needed for his household was Allah and His Messenger. He gave everything. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he was amongst those he freed, yani Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anh, from chains of slavery. He freed Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anh. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr, this is why he was a Siddiq. This is why he was known as the right-hand man of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The most beloved of men to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the most beloved of individuals to him was Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, and from Rijal, and from the men, Abuha, her father, Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. You should not be attached to the wealth which you have striven to earn. As for that which is given to you, the right way to deal with it is to not reject it, as long as it is from a legal source. If you are in need of it, you should take it, and if not, you should give it away in charity. And so lastly, Islam is something of moderation. Our abstinence, our practice of abstinence and not seeking from others, or not indulging in others, or indulging in other vain pursuits, there's also something in moderation. If we need it, and it's a true need, we're gonna be behind on our gas bill, we need to pay the gas bill. Somebody's up, Bismillah, take it. It's from the religion, you take it. That's from, you don't deny the provision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you. That comes from the provision of Allah. When an individual is offering you, that comes from Allah. It doesn't come from the person. Don't get it twisted. It doesn't come from the other. It comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. There's a story where a man he's shipwrecked. He's shipwrecked and is floating on a plank in the middle of the sea. And he's beseeching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, assist me, help me, help me, help me, help me. Send somebody my way, help me, help me. And then a boat comes by, or a ship or whatever comes by. And they ask him, do you need any help? And he says, no, I'm waiting for my Lord to help you. And then another ship comes by. And he says, do you need any help? And he said, no, I'm waiting for my Lord to help me. And then the last one comes by. He said, are you sure you don't need any help? And he said, no, I'm waiting for my Lord to help me. And then a storm comes, and he drowns, and he dies. And he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after his death, and he's standing before his Lord, why didn't you send anybody to help? Why didn't you help me? Ya Allah, I was asking, I was beseeching you, I was calling upon you. He said, yeah, and I sent you 3 different ships. I sent you 3 boats. You refused all 3 of those help, right? So yeah, and it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts our provision even in the hands of others, but it doesn't come from the other. The help doesn't come from the person. It comes from Allah Azza wa Jal. But we do it within moderation. We do it when we actually have the need, inshallah ta'ala, not when we don't kind of have the need. And if we get in excess of what we actually need, then we look for somebody else that we can return that favor to. We look for somebody else that we can return that small act of kindness to, inshallah Azza wa Jal. And the author finishes with a dua. May Allah make us people who are content with what they have, and make plentiful our inward and outward sustenance. Make our wealth be in our hands so that we spend from it freely, and not in our hearts so that we become attached to it. May Allah make us among those who spend from their wealth seeking His noble countenance. May Allah bestow His blessings upon our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his family and companions. All praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes our welfare something that just exists in our hands. It doesn't become a nuisance, an attachment in our hearts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us a sense of iffah, that He gives us a sense of abstinence, that He makes us amongst those who don't bother and seek and covet what others may have, but rather we only covet and seek the richness of our own selves from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahumma inna nas'aluka huda wa tuqa wa afaf wa ghina. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, for piety, God consciousness, for a sense of chastity and abstinence, and for self-sufficiency, inshallah azza wa jal. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين آمين. نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب عفوا فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب عفوا فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب عفوا فاعف عنا يا كريم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا إن شاء الله. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا يا رحمن الرحيم يا رحمن الرحيم يا رب العالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our fasting and all of our standing in prayer and increase worship today. And inshallah ta'ala we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables us with His enabling grace, with His tawfiq, in order for us to reach these 10 nights in goodness, that we're able to seek and we're able to find, that we're able to reach Laylatul Qadr, which is hidden within amongst these 10 nights, inshallah azza wa jal. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillah.